The millionaire arrives home early and hears a scream coming from the basement. "I want the floor shining." As he walks down, he sees his triplets on their knees, with injured hands scrubbing the floor in silence. The stepmother watches everything coldly, not realizing she is being watched. What that father does is shocking. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us from which city you're watching us. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you will ever hear in your life. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse suite overlooking Miami Beach, casting golden rays across the marble floors. Richard Thornton stood on the balcony, his tailored suit perfectly pressed, his phone pressed to his ear as he closed yet another multi-million-dollar deal for his luxury resort empire. To anyone watching, he was the embodiment of success, a self-made entrepreneur who had built an empire in the tourism industry, a man who commanded respect in every boardroom he entered. But success, as Richard had learned, came with a price, and sometimes that price was paid by those who least deserved it. Inside the penthouse, three identical faces peered through the doorway of their shared bedroom. Emma, Olivia, and Sophie Thornton, 7-year-old triplets, with matching auburn curls and green eyes, watched their father with a mixture of longing and uncertainty. They remembered a time when his smile had been genuine, when his laughter had filled their home with warmth. But that was before the separation, before the court battles, before everything changed. Emma, the eldest by 3 minutes, clutched a sketchbook to her chest. The pages inside were blank, had been for months now. She used to draw constantly, filling page after page with colorful scenes of beaches and butterflies and families holding hands. But the crayons sat untouched in their box, now gathering dust on her nightstand. Olivia stood beside her, her fingers unconsciously tapping against her leg in a rhythmic pattern that had become as natural as breathing. Tap, 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 pause. Tap, tap, tap. The nervous habit had started small, barely noticeable, but now it accompanied her everywhere, a physical manifestation of the anxiety that lived in her chest like a stone. Sophie, the youngest, yawned and rubbed her eyes. Dark circles shadowed her face, evidence of another sleepless night. The nightmares came almost every evening now, vivid and terrifying, leaving her gasping for breath in the darkness too, afraid to call out for help. The sound of heels clicking against marble announced the arrival of Victoria Ashford, Richard's fiancée. She swept into the room like a model on a runway, her designer dress flowing behind her, her smile bright and practiced. In public, Victoria was charm personified, gracious, elegant, the perfect complement to Richard's success. She attended charity galas, posed for society magazines, and spoke eloquently about her dedication to the girls. But the triplets knew a different Victoria, the one who emerged when the cameras stopped flashing and the doors closed behind them. "Girls," Victoria's voice was honey-sweet as she noticed them watching. "Why aren't you dressed yet? We have the photographer coming in an hour for the magazine spread. Richard wants his perfect little family on display." The last words carried an edge that made Sophie shrink back. "We were just getting ready," Emma said quietly, pulling her sisters back toward their room. "Well, hurry up. And Emma, make sure you smile this time. Last month's photos made you look positively miserable." Victoria's laugh was light, musical even, but her eyes were cold. "We wouldn't want people to think you're unhappy, would we?" As soon as their bedroom door closed, the three girls huddled together on Emma's bed, their voices dropping to whispers. This was their sanctuary, these stolen moments when they could speak freely, when they could be honest about the fear that followed them like a shadow. "I miss Mom," Sophie whispered, tears gathering in her eyes. "Why can't we see her anymore?" Olivia's fingers tapped faster against her leg. "Dad says it's better this way, that Mom wasn't good for us." "But that's not true," Emma insisted, her voice fierce despite its softness. "Mom never made us feel like this. She never made us scared to talk or laugh or just be ourselves." The truth was a weight they all carried. Their mother, Dr. Catherine Thornton, was a literature professor at the University of Miami, a woman who had dedicated her life to education and integrity. She had loved them with a gentleness that stood in stark contrast to the life Richard had built around wealth and appearances. The marriage had crumbled under the weight of incompatible values, but what followed had been far worse than a simple separation. Richard had wanted full custody, not out of love, the girls had come to understand, but out of pride. Out of the need to win, to control, to possess. And he had won, through means that Catherine's honest nature could never have anticipated or defended against. False allegations, manipulated evidence, lawyers who knew how to bend the truth without breaking it entirely. The judge had ruled in Richard's favor, granting him exclusive custody while painting Catherine as unstable, unfit. It had been a lie, but it had been a convincing one. Now, Catherine lived in a modest apartment across town, her career under scrutiny from the same fabricated accusations, her heart broken by the separation from her daughters. The court order allowed only supervised visits, and even those had become increasingly rare as Victoria found reasons to cancel them. "Do you think she thinks about us?" Sophie asked, her voice small. "Every day," Emma said with certainty. "Just like we think about her." A sharp knock on the door made them jump. Victoria's voice cut through the wood. "5 minutes, girls, and I want to see perfect smiles." The photo shoot was exactly as exhausting as they had anticipated. The photographer positioned them around Richard and Victoria, creating the image of a blended family, in perfect harmony. Richard's hand rested on Victoria's waist. Victoria's smile never wavered, and the girls stood in their matching dresses, their faces arranged in expressions that looked like happiness, if you didn't look too closely. "Beautiful," the photographer exclaimed. "Mr. Thornton, you have a gorgeous family." Richard's chest swelled with pride. This was what he had built, an image of success that extended beyond his business empire to his personal life. A beautiful fiancée, 3 lovely daughters, a life that others envied. The fact that it was built on a foundation of manipulation and control was something he had learned to rationalize, to justify, to ignore. After the photographer left, Victoria's demeanor shifted like a switch being flipped. "Olivia, stop that infernal tapping. It's driving me insane." Olivia's hand froze mid-tap, her face flushing with shame. "And Sophie, stand up straight. You slouch like you have no spine whatsoever." Sophie straightened immediately, her eyes fixed on the floor. "Emma, I saw you whispering during the shoot. When I tell you to smile, I don't mean talk. I mean smile. Do you understand the difference?" "Yes, ma'am," Emma whispered. Richard, absorbed in his phone, barely registered the exchange. He had learned to tune out the small moments, the subtle cruelties that Victoria wielded like precision instruments. It was easier that way, easier than confronting what his choices had created, easier than admitting that perhaps he had been wrong. The days blended together in a routine that felt more like survival than living. The girls attended an exclusive private school where they were expected to excel, to represent the Thornton name with distinction. They did their homework in silence, ate their meals with perfect manners, and spoke only when spoken to. The spontaneity of childhood had been carefully trained out of them, replaced with a careful watchfulness, a constant awareness of Victoria's moods and expectations. But children, no matter how controlled, find ways to hold on to pieces of themselves. Emma kept her blank sketchbook hidden under her mattress, a symbol of something she had lost but refused to completely abandon. Olivia's tapping became a secret language, a way of expressing what she couldn't say aloud. And Sophie, despite her exhaustion, held on to her dreams of her mother, the good dreams that sometimes broke through the nightmares. It was on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after the photo shoot, that the first crack appeared in Richard's carefully constructed world. He had returned early from a business trip to Orlando, his meetings concluded ahead of schedule. The penthouse was quiet when he entered, unusually so. Victoria's car was in the garage, so she was home, but there were no sounds of activity. He moved through the apartment, loosening his tie, calling out but receiving no response. Then he heard it, a muffled sob, quickly stifled, coming from somewhere below. The penthouse had a storage level, a basement area where they kept seasonal decorations and old furniture. Richard rarely went down there, but something pulled him toward the stairs, some instinct he couldn't name. The scene that greeted him at the bottom of those stairs would haunt him for the rest of his life. His 3 daughters were on their knees on the concrete floor, scrubbing brushes in their small hands, their fingers red and raw. Buckets of soapy water sat beside them, and their school uniforms were soaked and dirty. Tears streaked Sophie's face. Emma's jaw was clenched in determination. Olivia's hand tapped frantically against her leg even as she scrubbed, and standing over them, arms crossed, was Victoria. Her voice was low, controlled, venomous. "I don't care if it takes all night. You spilled juice on the carpet upstairs, and you'll learn that actions have consequences. Every single box in this basement will be cleaned, every surface scrubbed, until I decide you've learned your lesson." "But it was an accident," Emma said, her voice breaking. "Sophie didn't mean to." "Accidents are just carelessness by another name, and carelessness must be corrected." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Now scrub, or we'll add the garage to your list." Richard stood frozen, his briefcase slipping from his fingers and hitting the floor with a thud. The sound made everyone turn. Victoria's expression shifted instantly, surprise giving way to a calculated smile. "Richard, you're home early. I was just teaching the girls about responsibility." But Richard wasn't looking at Victoria. He was looking at his daughters, at their hands, at their faces, at the fear in their eyes that they tried so hard to hide. And for the first time in years, he truly saw them, not as accessories to his perfect life, not as pieces in a game he had won, but as children. His children. Children who were suffering. "Go upstairs," he said quietly. "All 3 of you. Go to your room." The girls scrambled to their feet, not needing to be told twice. They fled up the stairs, leaving Richard and Victoria alone in the basement. "Richard, before you say anything, let me explain," Victoria began, her voice smooth, practiced. "How long?" Richard interrupted. His voice was still quiet, but there was something new in it, something hard and cold. "How long has this been happening?" "I don't know what you mean. I was simply—" "Don't." The single word cut through her explanation like a knife. "Don't lie to me. Not right now." Victoria's mask slipped just for a moment, revealing the calculation beneath. "Those girls need discipline, Richard. They need structure. You're too busy building your empire to see that they were running wild, disrespecting everything we've built here." "They're 7 years old." "Exactly. 7 years old and already manipulative, already testing boundaries. I've been doing what you were too weak to do. I've been making them into proper young ladies instead of the wild little things their mother was raising them to be." The mention of Catherine sent a jolt through Richard's chest. Their mother loved them. Their mother was raising them to be soft, to be weak. "Is that what you want? Children who can't handle the real world?" Victoria stepped closer, her voice dropping to an intimate whisper. "I've been helping you, Richard, helping you create the family you deserve, the family that matches your success." But as Richard looked around the basement at the buckets and brushes, at the evidence of what his daughters had been enduring, Victoria's words rang hollow. This wasn't strength. This wasn't discipline. This was cruelty dressed up in justifications he had been all too willing to accept because they allowed him to avoid looking too closely at what he had created. "I think you should leave," he said quietly. Victoria's eyes flashed. "Excuse me." "Leave. Tonight. Pack your things and go." "You can't be serious. Richard, we're engaged. We have a life together. We have plans." "Plans built on what? On hurting children? On making them afraid in their own home?" Victoria's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake. You have no idea what I know about your business dealings, Richard. The shortcuts you've taken, the rules you've bent, the people you've paid to look the other way. If you think you can just dismiss me, you're more naive than I thought." The threat hung in the air between them, and Richard felt the familiar weight of his choices pressing down on him. She was right. She knew too much. She could destroy everything he had built. But as he thought about his daughters upstairs, about their raw hands and fearful eyes, he realized something that should have been obvious all along. He had already destroyed the things that mattered most. "Get out," he repeated, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. We'll discuss the rest later, but tonight you leave. For a long moment, Victoria stared at him, her mind clearly calculating her next move. Then she smiled cold and sharp. This isn't over, Richard. Not by a long shot. She brushed past him and climbed the stairs, her heels clicking with each step. Richard stood alone in the basement, surrounded by the evidence of his failures. Above him he could hear muffled voices, Victoria's sharp tones giving orders, doors slamming. And then, finally, the sound of the elevator descending, carrying her away. He climbed the stairs slowly, his legs heavy. At the top he found his daughters standing in the hallway, clustered, together like they always were, their eyes wide and uncertain. "Is she gone?" Emma asked quietly. Richard nodded. "She's gone." "Is she coming back?" Sophie's voice trembled. Richard looked at his daughters, really looked at them, and saw the damage he had allowed to happen. The blank sketchbook, the nervous tapping, the dark circles under tired eyes, the fear that had become their constant companion. "No," he said, and meant it. "She's not coming back." The relief on their faces was immediate and heartbreaking. They didn't cheer or celebrate. They simply exhaled, like they had been holding their breath for months and could finally let it go. "Let me see your hands," Richard said gently. Hesitantly, the girls extended their hands. The skin was red and irritated, small cuts visible where the rough brushes had scraped too hard. Richard felt something crack inside his chest, some wall he had built around his heart to protect himself from feeling too much. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." Emma looked up at him with those green eyes, so like his own. "What happens now, Daddy?" It was a question Richard didn't have an answer to. Not yet. But as he gathered his daughters close, feeling them lean into him with a trust he didn't deserve, he made a silent promise. Whatever happened next, whatever it cost him, he would make this right. He would become the father they deserved, not the one he had been. Even if it meant confronting every lie he had told, every corner he had cut, every person he had hurt to get where he was. Even if it meant losing everything. Because he had finally realized that without his daughter's happiness, without their trust and love, he had nothing worth keeping anyway. The night stretched ahead, of them, full of uncertainty and fear and the first fragile threads of hope. And in a modest apartment across town, Catherine Thornton sat at her kitchen table, grading papers and wondering, as she did every night, if her daughters were thinking of her too. She had no way of knowing that everything was about to change, that the walls Richard had built between them were beginning to crumble, that sometimes the path to redemption begins with a single moment of clarity, a single choice to finally see the truth. The story was far from over. In fact, in many ways it was just beginning. The days following Victoria's departure felt like learning to breathe again. The penthouse, once filled with tension, gradually began to feel like a home. Richard cancelled his business trips, rearranged his meetings, and for the first time in years made his daughters his priority. But the damage ran deeper than he had imagined. Emma still hadn't touched her crayons. Olivia's tapping had actually increased, and Sophie's nightmares continued, though she had finally started coming to Richard's room when they woke her, a small step toward trust. Richard hired a kind housekeeper named Mrs. Patterson, a grandmother, with warm eyes who treated the girls like treasures. She taught them to bake cookies, let them make messes, and never raised her voice. The girls blossomed under her care, small smiles appearing more frequently. But there was a shadow that hung over everything. The girls asked about their mother constantly now, their questions growing bolder. "Why can't we see Mom?" Emma asked one morning over breakfast. Richard set down his coffee cup carefully. "It's complicated, sweetheart." "That's what you always say," Olivia pointed out, "but we're not babies." She was right. They deserved the truth. "Your mother and I had a disagreement about what was best for you, and I fought very hard to make sure you stayed with me." "Too hard?" Sophie asked quietly. The question hit Richard like a physical blow. "Yes, too hard, and not always fairly." "Does Mom want to see us?" Emma asked. "Every day. She thinks about you every single day." "Then why can't we see her?" Because of decisions I made, rules I put in place that I thought were right, but weren't. Richard took a deep breath. But I'm going to fix that, I promise. That afternoon, Richard made a phone call he had been avoiding for 3 years. Catherine answered cautiously. Richard, Catherine, I need to talk to you. In person, if you're willing. They met at a small coffee shop. Catherine arrived looking thinner than he remembered, tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. She sat across from him, her eyes wary. What is this about, Richard? I've been wrong, he finally managed. About everything. So Richard told her. About Victoria. About what he had witnessed in the basement. About the changes he had seen in their daughters. They ask about you constantly. They miss you. They need you. Catherine's hands trembled around her teacup. The court order says supervised visits only, and even those have been denied for months. I know. I was the one denying them. Richard forced himself to meet her eyes. I was wrong to do that. Why now? Why, after 3 years of keeping me away from my daughters, are you suddenly having a change of heart? Because I finally saw what I was doing to them. Richard leaned forward. Catherine, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but the girls deserve better. They deserve their mother. What are you proposing? I want a petition for shared custody, real shared custody. I want the girls to be able to spend time with you, to rebuild the relationship I took from them. The court won't just overturn its previous ruling. I know. That's why I'm prepared to tell the truth about how I won custody in the first place. Catherine's eyes widened. Richard, if you admit to falsifying evidence, you could face serious consequences. I know, but I've already lost the things that matter most. I'm just trying to get them back. Catherine studied him for a long moment. I want to believe you, but you've lied so many times. All I can do is show you, starting now. He showed her a document he had drafted that morning. It was a confession, detailed and damning, outlining every illegal and unethical action he had taken during the custody battle. I'm going to file this with the court. Catherine read the document, tears in her eyes. The girls, how are they really? Scared, hurt, but resilient. Richard's voice cracked. They're like you that way. I want to see them. You will. But Catherine, there's something else. Victoria made threats before she left. She knows things about my business dealings that could be dangerous. Are the girls in danger? I don't think so, but I've hired security, just in case. That night, Richard sat with his daughters before bed. I talked to your mum today. 3 heads snapped up in unison. You did, Sophie breathed. I did, and I told her how much you miss her, and I'm going to make that happen. When? Olivia's tapping had stopped completely. Soon, I promise. But there are some things I need to fix first, some mistakes I need to make right. What kind of mistakes? Emma watched him carefully. When your mum and I separated, I was angry. I wanted to win. So I did some things that weren't fair. I told lies about your mum to make sure you stayed with me. The girls were quiet. What kind of lies? Emma asked. I said she wasn't a good mother, but none of it was true. Your mum loves you more than anything, and she's always been a wonderful mother. Are you going to tell people you lied? Olivia asked. Yes, even though it might get me in trouble, because telling the truth is more important than protecting myself. Sophie climbed into Richard's lap. Will we get to see Mom even if you get in trouble? That's the plan, sweetheart. That's exactly the plan. The next few days were a whirlwind. Richard met with lawyers, drafted documents, and began unwinding the lies he had constructed. He discovered that Catherine was facing her own crisis at the university, a formal inquiry based on the same false allegations he had used in court. He reached out to an old friend who sat on the university's board of trustees. The message was clear. The allegations against Dr. Catherine Thornton were baseless and should be dismissed. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One evening, Emma approached him with her tablet. Daddy, there's something I need to show you. She pulled up a video file, her hands shaking. I was scared to show you before, but now I think you will believe me. Richard watched the video, his blood running cold. It was footage from the basement, filmed from behind a stack of boxes. Victoria's voice, cold and cruel, threatening the girls, describing the boarding school in Switzerland where she planned to send them, far from both parents. "How long have you had this?" Richard asked. "A few weeks. I hid my tablet behind the toy box. I thought maybe if I had proof someone would believe us." Richard pulled her into a fierce hug. "You are so brave, and I'm so sorry you felt you had to do this alone." The video changed everything. Richard's lawyers filed for a restraining order and prepared for Victoria's retaliation. It came swiftly. Within days, Victoria's lawyers released a statement to the press, outlining Richard's business improprieties. The media frenzy was immediate and brutal, but Richard had prepared for this. He released his own statement, a full confession of his actions during the custody battle, an apology to Catherine, and Emma's video showing the world exactly what kind of person Victoria was. Public opinion shifted rapidly. The court ruled in favor of joint custody. Catherine was granted equal parenting time, and a restraining order was issued keeping Victoria away from the family. The day the ruling came through, Richard drove the girls to Catherine's apartment. It was Mother's Day. The girls clutched their handmade cards. Catherine opened the door, and for a moment, everyone froze. Then Sophie broke free and ran too, her mother, Emma, and Olivia right behind her. Catherine dropped to her knees, gathering all three girls into her arms, tears streaming down her face. "My babies," she whispered. "My sweet, beautiful babies." Richard stood in the doorway watching the reunion. This was what he had stolen from them, but seeing his daughters in their mother's arms, he knew he had finally done something right. Catherine looked up at him. "Thank you," she mouthed. The weeks that followed were not easy. Richard faced investigations into his business practices. His reputation took a significant hit. Several business partners severed ties with him. But he found he didn't care as much as he thought he would, because he had his daughter's trust. He had Catherine's cautious friendship. He had the chance to be the father he should have been all along. One weekend, Richard made a suggestion. "What if we went somewhere different, the beach, just a small house I found for rent?" They invited Catherine to join them, and she agreed. The beach house was small, nothing like the luxury Richard was accustomed to, but it was perfect. They spent their days building sandcastles, collecting shells, and swimming in the ocean. One night, after the girls had gone to bed, Richard and Catherine sat on the beach. "I never thought we'd be here," Catherine said quietly. "Neither did I. For a long time, I thought winning meant having everything my way. I didn't understand that real winning meant having people you love who love you back." "The girls are healing," Catherine observed. "Emma's been drawing again. Olivia's tapping has almost stopped, and Sophie slept through the night for the first time in months. They're resilient, but they'll carry scars from this. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for the scars I caused." Catherine turned to look at him. "You've changed, really changed. I had to. I was becoming someone I didn't want to be." Richard smiled wryly. "I still have a long way to go, but for the first time in years, I feel like I'm on the right path." The next morning, Richard woke early and made breakfast for everyone. When the girls came stumbling out, sleepy-eyed and smiling, and Catherine joined them at the small kitchen table, Richard felt a contentment he had never experienced in all his years of luxury and success. After breakfast, they walked along the beach together. Emma ran ahead collecting shells. Olivia walked between Richard and Catherine, holding both their hands. Sophie stayed close to Richard. "Daddy," Sophie said suddenly, "are you happy?" Richard looked down at his youngest daughter. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm happy, are you?" Sophie nodded vigorously. "I'm really happy. I have you and Mommy and my sisters. That's everything I need." As they walked back, the sun warm on their faces and the sound of their daughter's laughter filling the air, Richard felt peace, not the absence of problems, but the deep peace that comes from knowing you're finally living in alignment with what truly matters. That evening, as they sat together watching the sunset, Emma pulled out her sketchbook. She showed them her latest creation, a family portrait. Richard and Catherine sat on either side, with the three girls in the middle, all holding hands. "It's us," Emma explained. "Our family. It's different than it used to be, but it's still good. Maybe even better, because now it's real." Richard looked at the drawing and felt tears slip down his cheeks. "It's perfect, absolutely perfect." Catherine reached over and squeezed his hand, not romantically, but with the warmth of genuine friendship. They were not going to be a couple again, but they were partners in raising their daughters, and that was its own kind of love. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Richard made a silent vow. He would spend the rest of his life being worthy of this moment, of his daughter's trust, of Catherine's forgiveness, of the second chance he had been given, because redemption was not a destination, it was a journey, a daily choice to be better, to choose love over pride and honesty over convenience. The story of Richard Thornton was far from over. There would be more challenges ahead, but for the first time in years he was facing them with integrity, with love, and with the support of the people who mattered most. And that made all the difference.